ko tai mai ki te tautoko te kaupapa o te rā. No reira, tēnā rā koutou katoa. And a special welcome because we are in Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori. So we'll make an effort to say at least one Māori word in your kōrero today. That would be amazing.
Aye.
There you go. See? Kia ora. Beautiful. Right, swiftly moving on. Apologies, I have received one from Stuart Bull. Any other apologies? Thank you, Councillor McPhail. Seconded Councillor Roy. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Thank you. Public forums, not any I'm aware of. Confirmation of minutes is item 5. Thank you. Minutes of the 2nd of August. Seems like a long time ago already. Would you like to move those?
Second.
Right. Moved Councillor McPhail, seconded Chairman Horrell. Any changes or questions? I'll put the motion in. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right. And before we launch into anything further, just to draw your attention to the fact we have a new format for the agenda, committee agenda, and I think all the committees will be the same as we go forward. So if you have any feedback, could you share that with me either in writing or ensure that I write a note about it? And I'll feed that back to the teams just so that we don't end up with 12 councillors giving their 20 cents worth. So if you've got any feedback about the change of style or anything, just direct that to me, please. So item 6 is the adoption of climate change subcommittee resolutions, which I don't have any of. And item 7 is notification of extraordinary items, and I don't have any of those either. Questions? None. And reports from the chairman. Well, that's my report, is that we've got new format. And there's one there from Councillor Rodway. Did you want to speak to that? Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. You know, I think Nicola, you might have really supposed to have gone to this, but you weren't available, so I was called on to go. And I knew a little bit about it, but it really is a very important organisation. And I guess most people are aware of what it does, and it's set out briefly in my report. The newspaper report was more comprehensive, and you can find out more about them by going to their website. In particular, helping people that are new to the province and others in financial difficulties, and knowing the bad weather that we can have down here, as we've had in the last couple of days, trying to live in conditions where your house is not warm enough and it's not dry enough. It's really difficult. So the organisation does a great job. I said I'd bring along that hygrometer and thermometer, but due to my age, I forgot. So I will try to remember it one day. That it's a really useful device. It tells you to have in your house and to take it to different parts of your house to make sure that it's not too damp and that it's in the right temperature. So, yeah.
I think Councillor Gibson and I have both got ones that we can share with people as well. So yeah, we can all remember to bring them next time, councillors.
Well, the council supports the Warm Homes Trust, and I certainly recommend that we carry on doing that.
Thank you. Any other councillors' reports? Chairman Horrell?
Just a question for Morris. Has the uptake dropped off? Is it steady, or?
I think it's pretty steady. Yeah, I couldn't give you any numbers, but they do have more detail on the website. But there's 7,000 according to the website at the moment. As far as I know, it's still growing. And the thing that they talked about most was new people coming into Invercargill with particular susceptibility towards of language difficulties in some cases and not knowing where to go to and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other question?
No, just a report.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
I just last week I attended a Environment South and MPI will support cultivation field day up at Murray Shallards up at Wendon. By the sounds of it, they did 3 of them around the province, and they seem to have been reasonably well supported. But it was a good day of the team showing critical source areas, mainly for contractors, understanding what's allowed and what's not around critical source areas, slope degrees, as we're coming into that season, trying to prepare them. There's certainly plenty of interesting questions being asked. Probably the main concern, even for myself, is that we still seem to be playing with two sets of rules, which will be nice to tidy that up between the Southern Water and Land Plan and the NES and the government rules. So certainly that's probably the only sort of confusing point a wee bit at the moment, but otherwise it was still a good day to show people what's going on and prepare for the next season.
Oh, thank you. Anything else, Councillor Goshen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for Councillor McPhail regarding cultivation, ploughing and so on. Was there much talk on the day of zero tillage methods or the progress that that's making in the region, given climate change vulnerability and the effect of loss of carbon through tillage into the air? Is that a live topic amongst cultivators?
I can speak in regards to as being a contractor and even looking at the price of diesel and all these things, that there's things that are affecting, looking at the cost of things, not necessarily the zero carbon side of things, but actually there's a bit of change going on trying to do things more efficiently. Diesel is probably one of the bigger costs, and it's not getting any cheaper, the gear and all this. So I do know some contractors are trying to do minimum tillage, or farmers are too, because the cost is naturally a flow-on effect for that. Maybe down your side of things, but economically we need to too. So, but certainly they do promote minimum tillage. I think the ES does that. So in regards to those things too.
Just further to that, does that mean an increase in the use of herbicide because of minimum tillage?
Well, to be honest, if you get the sprays right on minimum tillage, often cultivating, you grow more weeds. So if you get the spray right, minimum tillage, some of the systems are actually, you get less weed growth. So less spraying needed and follow-up sprays on the crop. So less disturbance of the soil, generally just less weed growth.
Thank you.
That's to explain it.
Got Councillor Gibson and then Chairman Horrell.
Firstly, can I make the point, Mr. Guyton, that there's several different things of minimum tillage. One of them is a dry stale seabed, which is work just in 1 inch or 2, and just keep working it to get rid of the weeds. And the other one is to run it through a spraying system. And you'll remember that glyphosate is actually neutralised when it hits soil.
Oh, I don't believe that, but thank you.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that we'd like to probably that Linda and I didn't talk to her about announcing it. I'm getting married tomorrow.
I didn't see that coming.
Me neither. Nor did my husband.
I thought that Mr. Pemberton would like that, but we've just finished the environmental awards. The decisions have been made, finalised at 9 o'clock this morning. So if everybody knows that, you know where it's up to. The other thing I'd like to just talk to is the Makarua Catchment Group have done all those tillage things and looked at behaviours of animals over the winter period, and they've had a scientist down here for 4 days a week. Now, they've done a great job in looking at the winter grazing system and how they're going to deal with it, and they've looked over that in the form of minimum tillage and full crop of butter beet and whatever. So there'll be interest coming out of it. There'll be an interesting result coming out of there for us.
Thanks, Councillor. I think. Or not. Chairman Horrell, you have a question, I hope.
I thought we brought Chair. I attended the RM Lawyers Conference in Queenstown on Friday and spoke on a panel on pivoting towards forestry was actually the topic. It was actually we had somebody from the forestry industry, we had myself, we had somebody from the Environmental Defence Society and somebody from Beef and Lamb. So it seemed to be very well received. It was probably a sweet spot, as usual, it's probably a sweet spot in the middle of, and basically we don't want whole farms being planted, but the right tree in the right place is really good. Interested to know that in the last 12 months, I think it was 60,000 hectares planted, which is well ahead of the 30,000 that the Climate Change Commission advocate we need going forward. They're also looking into more native plantings, because actually 2050 might be the first target, but actually that's not the end of it. And if we could actually be planting native plantations going forward as well, I believe that would be useful. You know, they're more difficult to establish, but all in all, it seemed to be very well received, and it was an interesting debate. I was the only one who didn't do death by PowerPoint and spoke less, but I think I listened more.
Excellent. Councillor Rodway, you had a question.
Yes, Madam Chair, sorry, another comment rather than a question. I read Nichols' column in the newspaper on Saturday, and I was motivated to write a letter back to the newspaper, which hasn't been published yet, because I thought the tone of the article was that, you know, trees were a bad thing. And that may have been right, but that was the impression that I got. And the gist of my letter to the paper is that we do need to plant more trees. We don't want the region covered in trees, but we do need to plant more trees, and we need more diverse agricultural ecosystems. And I referred to the scientific paper that was published in the Royal Society of New Zealand recently by Dr. McDowell and others, saying that we need fewer cows and fewer sheep and more trees and more crops if we're going to meet our climate change goals, our nutrient limitation goals, and the health of our community. So I apologise to Nicol if I misinterpreted what he was saying, but that was my impression when I read the article.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing that appear.
My apologies if that's what you picked up, but I was covering quite a few bases, and my article had to be trimmed a little bit. So if that certainly wasn't the impression I was trying to put across. It was basically that actually we do want the right tree in the right place, but we don't want whole farms, classes 1 and 3 planted in trees. That highly productive land we do want to keep, but I'm not anti-tree planting at all. We know we need them.
Thanks, Chairman. Councillor Guyton, do you have a question?
Yes, for Councillor Horrell, but just to support what you've said there, I think George Monbiot would be behind your views as well. Councillor Horrell, you talked about native trees, plantations of native trees that they discussed. Can you remember which particular tree they were advocating for plantation forestry?
We didn't get down to that detail, but I know we were very keen on that sort of intergenerational sustainable plantings. Ideally, I'd like to see us plant a few cowries in Southland. We might avoid cowrie dieback. We know they actually will grow down here. I think you've got one growing in your own area. But we've got Totara, we've got a range of trees that we probably took for granted when we had them. If we actually started off in a nursery, I believe in 60, 70 years, you would probably have the ability to take your 1% or whatever a year, and far more attractive rather than a monoculture. And obviously, the first thing is preparing plantings, areas where you don't actually want commercial harvests going on. But I think there is potential going forward to actually be looking at that. And if you actually had plants that were 6 or 7 year old, they almost become idiot proof, and you don't have to have problems of having to put your little shoulder thing around it, and we know that the attrition rate can be quite high. But if you've got a tree that's big enough, even somebody like me can plant them when they live. So,
I wonder if we could, maybe through the meeting that you went to, conference that you went to, learn which trees would be appropriate for us to, as a council, invest in now, just even in terms of encouraging those kind of establishments, so that we are prepared in the future for what I think is a very, very sound idea. Would that be possible to find out what's on the list for here?
right. Well, I guess iwi in particular will know what's going to grow well here, and I'm not sure we need expert advice, but we know what has grown naturally in the province in the past, but actually, yeah, I'd love to see some carrots planted actually. Yeah.
Thanks. Councillor McDonald, and then we'll make the last.
Briefly, thanks, Madam Chair. That was quite an interesting discussion we just had. I just want to comment on that. We're talking, in my view, about two different things. We may be talking about landscape values, and so important for this province going forward. Councillor Rodway is talking about climate change. The two are different. We're not going to get there to attain climate goals by planting total trees, I'm afraid. That's reality. But for landscape values, totally understand that, that we need to be doing that. So there's no good choices in fixing our climate problems. We've just got to realise that. So we've probably got to be the best of a bad bunch.
Thank you. Councillor Evans, do you have a question? Because I will take a question, but not a comment at this point.
It's just the learnings from history regarding our native timber within our region. We have still currently native bush being harvested at a rate of 1% of the Waitutu state forest now. I believe if we just did it as a landscape value, we need to do it more to encapsulate and improve on that percentage that's being taken. So I think we need to do a bigger, as a council, it would be good for us to agree for a higher percentage of native to be planted.
So are you asking a
No, I'm just
question?
a bit of learnings.
Okay. There might be a request for some further discussion on this. Maybe that's your question. Could we have a further discussion?
Yeah.
Thanks for that. It's opened up a nice conversation, so we will have to follow that up, team. Thanks. Right. Item 1, which is 10.1 in my brain. 9.1, sorry. 10.1, blimey. The Future for Local Government Working Group paper. Recommendations, just to highlight those so that they lead the conversation. The recommendations are that we receive the report from the Future for Local Government Working Group. We endorse Environment Southland to work with the Southland Councils in Runaka to establish a Future for Local Government Working Group. And thirdly, nominate and appoint 2 councillors to the working group. They will work alongside the proposed senior staff member, Chief Executive Wilma Faulkner. Okay, so that is the focus of the item. Staff. Are you going to take us through this?
Thank you, Chair. This comes out of a conversation at the most recent Mural Forum, and actually a chair might like to speak about that conversation, but just to refresh your memories, the council has been involved over the last 18 months with the review process, and we did do a short workshop or briefing on the final report as it came out in the last month or two. But this is the next steps, and working with other councils and Runaka in the region jointly to progress the recommendations. I'll hand over to you, Chair, if you'd like to comment on the Mural Forum discussion.
Yes, Rachel, this was raised at the last Mural Forum, and we agreed to form a committee to actually look at options. There were discussions as well in on the very same topic. I'm hopeful that LGNZ will not try and come up with one size fits all. Different regions will come up with different approaches, but I think we're at a time when each region does need to look at what should local government look like in the future. I've got my own ideas, but this will be the start of a process, and I think we might end up with our own subcommittee, because I know there's quite a bit of interest around the table. This is not going to happen with any great speed. I think we need to be considered, but I believe if we come up with a Southland solution, it'll be whatever government today is, they're likely to run with something if a region is united behind a future form of local government. So probably leave it there. We'll probably find out a bit more after what goes on in Wellington, but I actually talked to the Northland chair at the conference last week, and we've got a sparse population, probably similar ideas to what I've got of actually leaving your structures in place with a diminished role, but actually getting your economies of scale out of basically an overarching committee that would work on the shared service type things, look for the efficiencies that we know are there, but still keep local representation. I think sparsely populated areas like that may well we end up, but we need to start with a blank piece of paper. The report doesn't cover the biggest issue, which is funding, and I'm not confident that any government's going to give us a lot of funding. So actually we need to look for efficiencies, and we need to actually make local government relevant to people who don't vote in great numbers at the moment, and the report, I don't believe, really handles that well. But it's a basis for discussion going forward. I think these are boards for conversations.
Thanks, Chairman. I've got Councillor McDonald and then Councillor Guyton and Councillor Rodway. So,
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor McDonald.
Comment to you, Nicole. So is the viewpoint around not so much amalgamation, but aggregation of services to find efficiencies? Is that?
Well, that's my personal.
That's your personal, but do you? Okay, so we're going to go to Wellington with some ideas. Is that basically what we're working towards, do you believe, around the future for local government?
Well, the debate tomorrow will be about receiving that report, its 17 recommendations, and I'm hopeful they will come up with basically telling regions not their own solutions. Rather, there'll be some people who say, let's all do the same thing, and there's quite a strong unitary flavour coming through. But from what I've seen, we've got unitaries, the environment perhaps does take second place to development. So I think there's, you might have a situation where you have regulatory things for everything in one being done by one agency. So what's probably equivalent in Environment South, and now at the moment you've got territorials who have land use. That sort of water. It actually makes much more sense to have a combined group and get some consistency across the province. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of debate going forward. This is really just the start of it, but I think you've really got to start from the 21st century. What should local governments look like? I mean, it started off where people were on horses, so you had a whole lot of little shires and wards because life has changed, and at the end of the day, people do want to be able to reach out the problem, but they also want some efficiencies. And when you could have one payroll for a start, you could have one building thing for the whole period. IT, especially with territorials, some of those big ticket items, there are a lot of savings, I believe. And
could I just say that seems a really good approach. What's been frustrating for me over a long period of time is that we got these ideas swirling around this region, really good ways forward, and we sit on our hands and do nothing. And we wait for the government to tell us about their ideas, and then we all throw our arms up and discuss. But what I'm hearing now is that we're going to go to Wellington with some ideas, come up with some stuff ourselves, which will be quite empowering for this region. So look, I think that's a really good direction to travel.
If I can just comment on that, Councillor, important that councillors share their opinions now, because that means that Chairman Horrell can take those ideas and concerns to the meeting tomorrow and in the future. So this is just to want to highlight that actually your sentiments now are what will inform Chairman Horrell's conversations when he takes them to on our behalf. So just bear that in mind when you're asking a question. Councillor Guyton.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think that you've got a good grasp of those issues, Nicola, and I'm just interested in the proposal that these decisions are best made regionally rather than centrally. I think that most of those issues that you talk about there, that does apply to it. That's a good approach. But some of the things that really need to be discussed as well, such as the voting age and the use of STV or other ones. I don't agree that they should be regional decisions. I think they should be central decisions that are made across the country so that we've got uniformity in at least those two issues. Otherwise, it just seems a nonsense that might be down to the makeup of particular councils, and I don't really think that's fair on the general population. Am I right in thinking that those are issues that would be also addressing?
Well, certainly the issues that discussed. My personal view is at the moment people are sick of getting top-down instruction, but you want the same voting system for a whole region, and at the moment, first past the post, decided for the territorials for the next election. Very confusing if you try and post something else different across the top of it. But the big issues really are getting a more efficient local government, actually getting local government that is treated as an equal partner going forward with central government, whatever colour it is. And we haven't seen that a lot in the last 5 or 6 years. But the reality is no government's going to want to continue to deal with 78 councils. So that report does have a strong regional flavour that we have regional planning documents that are reasonably seamless. Wherever you go, you would have, whether you've got territorials as well, if you go to one place and you would see all the information you need, which would be good. But I think most of the country has in a state of exhaustion with the amount of change that has come out in the last few years. This won't happen overnight, but I think we do need to have that serious conversation, and with the community and with iwi, and if we come up with a Southland solution, it could be different from a ECAN solution. It could be different from a Wellington solution. Some of those more city regions, they may well go for more of a unitary type thing, but where you've got a widely spaced population. I think the old adage that local money spent better locally, but concentrate on the efficiencies of the back room. It's certainly a debate that's going to be had, and there should be freedom for people who have to make different decisions, because one edict won't work for everybody. It'll only divide people.
Thanks, Chairman. Wilma, did you want to comment on that item, that question, comment?
Thanks so much, Chair. So we propose councillors this working group to the Mayoral Forum. There is the National Local Government New Zealand working group that is looking at the really large national matters, which relate to things like reporting around voting age and funding and things that we can't control regionally. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a Southland view of that and discuss that at this table. The proposal around the working group is primarily about the matters that were in the report, which we could actually be acting on now. And there's quite a lot, as the chair says, we can actually be doing in this space, particularly in relation to shared services, to the kinds of joint committees that we're heading towards with regional spatial planning, and the areas where collectively a voice from Southland to central government will be a useful collective voice. So the things we can control, the things that we can create a Southland perspective on to feed into that broader conversation. But there's much in the Future for Local Government report that is actually about things that we have quite a lot of control over now. And so the ability for us to look at that was part of the reason for suggesting this. So I think there's much conversation to be had at this table about the national matters as well as the local matters. But the idea that we might actually be able to advance some of that now and to the benefit of all of our ratepayers will be really helpful, particularly in more joined up working and shared services. Yeah.
Thank you, that helps considerably. Councillor Rodway, you're next, and then Councillor Evans.
Chair, as part of this, obviously, there's been discussion recently about a building. And I know that this building is getting towards the end of its useful life and would require quite a lot of upgrade. And recently in the paper, Mayor Clark has been talking about a combined building. I wonder whether or not this will be part of the discussion. It's maybe a particular Southland issue, but it's a very important one because of the costs involved. And it seems to me that it would be useful to have some kind of SWOT analysis of that. And I'm sure you'll be thinking about that. And I hope this will be part of the discussion going forward.
Did you want to reply to that?
Can I just make a comment about that sort of work? So there is a significant piece of work underway led by Don Rickety on this building and a business case for how our future accommodation should actually be managed. The building is pretty much in a state that requires a significant investment, and the question is whether this building is worth a significant investment is a worthwhile conversation. So we're looking at the immediate matters. You'll have noticed that we finally put some carpet over the concrete space in the building. We've got ongoing issues with this building's water tightness, but there's also an immediate matter of the building for whatever we decide to do, even if it is as proposed by the Mayor. Those are long-term strategies, they're 5 years plus strategies. So we also have to accommodate our staff in the next 5 years. So we're looking at all of those matters. We've certainly spoken to ICC at an officer level on what their proposals are. We do bring this case for conversation to this council. And we're considering all of those matters actively, but it needs to be of benefit to this council and its needs and the ratepayers. So it's an active piece of consideration. Yeah, we're very aware of what the detail of their proposal is.
All right, thank you.
Yes, Councillor Evans.
Thank you. Speaking, I like the idea of efficiencies and then discussing with constituents regarding our local government review recommendations. And the idea is we work towards more efficiencies is good. But through my research, the one thing that's missing, and it hasn't been highlighted at all within those recommendations, is representation. And we have areas that are underrepresented and areas that are overrepresented. And when you talk to people that are from my area, say, they don't want to lose their representation. They don't want to lose their voice. And that's extremely important. And I find it quite odd with those local government review recommendations. There's very little, if any. I didn't even see the word representation in there. So it would be good to take that back to make sure, sure they're talking about the efficiencies and the governance, but we've got to remember why we're here. The people want us as their voice. As a TA, whatever. How that's organised is fine. They still want to have that representation. So if you can just take that back, that would be good.
Councillor Evans, I'll ask Rachel just to chip in with that.
So, as was touched on at the recent workshop, we do have for this council a representation review coming through the process as well. So just to be aware of that too.
I'd like to be involved in this.
You will be ad nauseum, I suspect. Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, thanks, really good point, Paul. It's called, I call it the loss of identity for some people. And I can sympathise with your community out there. What, they may be saying, well, what do we have in common with them? People, are we going to be thrown in? So the thinking can be quite a bit more broader than the Southern region. I look at the District Council, for example. You've got more in common with the Gore District Council and the Gore District Council, Southern District Council than we have. We're a rural-based entity, a medium-sized town. Then we would have with the Invercargill City Council, for example. So I'm just putting that out there as narrow our thinking down to the southern region, or do we aggregate partners too? No. Who knows?
Who knows? Councillor Cook.
Well, I'd share some of the frustration that Councillor McDonald expressed before. Back in the 80s, when I was a bit younger, I was a member of a group called One Southland, one of the founding members of that, and we had exactly this discussion on many occasions with various councils at that time. The issue, was Councillor Evans pointed out, was representation, or who's going to represent the people. We've got 12 councillors. How many will we have if this happens and we're all amalgamated? We showed quite clearly that there would be considerable savings to the ratepayers in terms of finance and efficiencies. But the mayors at the time, I don't know them, this company aren't with us anymore, made it quite plain to me that this wasn't going to happen. So I think we need to move on, and hopefully that won't be the mood now, that we're going to put representation in the way of actually making some progress. It's really, I think, silly to believe that we can carry on having 4 councils for 110,000 people. That's just not tenable, and it costs the ratepayers a considerable amount of money which could be ameliorated, would be a term, minimised, without losing their control of what happens in local government. So I think we need to take some leadership here and move on with this, and not just sit around and talk about it, which we have done. As I say, we had exactly the same discussion about 1988.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morris, are you indicating, or you?
Sam,
Thank you.
just to bring us back to the recommendation.
Yes,
for
thank
this
you. I
year,
was-
noting the discussion and interest in representation, perhaps we would advocate that of the 2 councillors nominated, that one is from a rural setting and one comes from an urban. Make sure that there's point perspectives.
So to that point, I'm going to take those recommendations separately so that we can debate probably the last one more thoroughly, but so hold that thought. Thank you.
I'll move those first 2 be accepted.
Okay. We're looking at receiving the report and endorsing Environment Southland to work with Southland Councils Runaka to establish a Future for Local Government working group. Can I just draw your attention before I put that motion to one of the last sections in the report that states that Environment Southland will be the secretariat for this working group. So the cross-council working group will be run from within our team. And
Well, I just
I
say
think it's going to have an impact on.
it's really appropriate that we are. Because of their rating relationship we have with everyone in this region.
True that, but my point is that there will be budgetary and staff considerations along with that, so. Or perhaps not, but you know. It will be coming from within, which is nice. Okay, so the first 2 have been, sorry, who nominated? Councillor Rodway and seconded Councillor Evans, thank you. All those in favour of the first 2 recommendations, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. Right, somebody, the 3rd recommendation is to nominate and appoint 2 councillors to the working group. Councillor McPhail, you have a comment?
Just, I'm happy to nominate someone in regards to this, and obviously it's been a good discussion around here, and to be honest, I know all the other councils have done the chair and deputy chair, and that was probably what I was thinking was going to happen. But in the context of this discussion, I'm happy with the chair to be involved, but I'm happy to nominate Councillor Ludlow in regards to that, if he's happy to be involved, bringing the town versus the country.
Versus and, not and, not versus and.
If so be. I think that's good too. That we have to do something. With that.
Anything else to do?
I'll second that.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. You've got me by surprise. Thank you. So the nominations for those 2 positions are Chairman Horrell and myself as chair of S&P. Okay. Is that clear with everybody?
It's just as something ongoing, we could probably have a subcommittee of perhaps the chairs of the councils to report back to, because this is a Mayoral Forum initiative, so it makes sense that you have those people at the table, but once we start discussing things, I think we need, well, obviously everyone's going to be interested, but we need to be able to disseminate that information. I know we've got some people who are quite passionate about the table.
So I might move that motion that's on the table and then we can have that discussion, Chairman. So we've got Councillor McPhail and Councillor McDonald move and second. Yeah. Who's the second one? Me. So this Chairman Horrell
I'll
and
do
then
the
Horrell
poll.
for both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
is that all
Thanks. So is that clear with everybody? Right, got that motion then. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, Wilmers, did you want to speak to that suggestion of Chairman's?
On something, I think,
Yeah.
this just comes back to spending place.
Anybody else have a thought about that? Sorry, Chairman Horrell, Wilmers just suggesting that the working group attendees just report back to this committee rather than it being needing another subcommittee. Is it? Okay. Thank you. So we'll just, do we need to formalise that?
It's fine, this committee has initiated this, I think, comes back to this committee, and then all the other conversations about the future of local government that go through the LGNZ work and through the regional sector work would come back here anyway. So it's one conversation.
Great.
Beautiful.
If you feel the need to minute that, however, we can make sure it's limited.
Thanks.
I'm concerned that Councillor Evans said he wanted his thing, his community represented. And I've had my community downgraded by my friend on my left. I want to be on it too, but how do we make sure that Paul's community gets a fair play?
Is that not the function of this committee, councillor? Did you?
Are you happy with where you're at?
Fair players recommendations or sharing our thoughts with the two representation and Councillor Chairman Harold. If we can get our thoughts through, that would be fine.
Just need to make sure that we have space, allow space for you to share your thoughts with us.
This is all two that we nominated do push things through with a wee bit of gusto. You know, we don't want to be like Councillor Cook said in 1988. I don't want to be sitting here and say we've been talking about this for decades. Those times are over. We've got to do something serious about it.
Do the best I can, councillor.
I think there's going to be a powerful incentive to come up with a Southland solution rather than have some solution in government. And I think we'll have the discussion going forward.
Absolutely.
Right, yes,
Quickly,
yeah.
I'd like to add, the reality is that around the mayoral forum, there's a fairly strong discussion of getting together and guiding ourselves rather than the government guiding us. So I think that's general consensus around the mayoral forum, and this group will obviously be pushing that hard too. So I'm confident of their representation.
Thanks, councillor. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you. Just to finish this off, Wilma. Thank you.
So can I just remind councillors, working groups and the mayoral forum are casual groups. They don't have a status of decision making. Everything must come here for conversation. This is the council with the powers, and the decision making. A working group is simply an agreement to work together, which is in itself useful. So everything will come back here. This is the place where the decisions are made. If council enters into ultimately joint committees, that has got a statutory framework, but again, all decision making, all decisions for council happens in this room. So there is nothing in a working group that will advance anything at a decision making level that does not come here for discussion, decision making.
But that sort of worries me in a bit too, because it's like turkeys voting for Christmas. We'll be discussing the loss of roles around this table. And so that's something for this group to talk about.
Yeah,
how do we avoid that situation?
Yeah. So that's
cancel Thanksgiving or Christmas.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for your contribution. I would like to move on.
Thank you.
Item 2. Proposed review of navigation safety bylaws. Welcome, Lyndon, to the table. The recommendations, just while Lyndon and Paul are getting sorted, to receive the report and to give approval to commence the review of the Environment Southland Navigation Safety Bylaws 2009 reviewed 2015 and associated infringement fee schedules. Please do a better job than I have. Lyndon, welcome.
So I think you've summed up exactly what I would have said, so thank you for that.
Sorry.
This is, I just wanted to take the opportunity to say that this is an earlier review than probably was planned. But as the report alludes to, it's one of the opportunities to review the bylaw came out after the well-documented incident in Riverton in July 2022. And so the outcome of that was that we felt operationally as staff that the level of infringement fines really don't meet contemporary expectations in terms of the level of incident and the damage that incident had on the victims. Not only that though, as you'll probably appreciate, other regional councils do review their bylaws in a similar time frame. And it's also a really good opportunity to look at what other bylaws are being used across the nation to see if we can also lift our best practice or benchmark opportunity. So earlier than expected, but we're recommending that we do this work because I think the incident has highlighted a need to do it earlier than planned. I'll hand over to Linda.
Yes, I'm Linda. Through you, Madam Chair. As Paul's highlighted, 8 years ago when the bylaws were last reviewed, the infringement regime was seen as quite possibly fit for purpose at the time, but recent incidents like the Riverton incident last year has obviously made it quite clear that they're not fit for purpose. So we're looking at some of the other regions that have already undertaken a review, and they have applied to the Ministry of Transport. And of course, any review is done through the Local Government Act and will, in particular for infringement offences, will end up with the Ministry of Transport to review, and they like to, they say, level consistency across the regions. So this is a great opportunity to be able to cast the lens over the bylaws and the infringement regime and bring them up to somewhere where, at least to where some of the other regions are. We use Auckland as an example. They were the last council to review their bylaws, and strangely enough, they only increased theirs by from $200 to $300 and $500 for larger vessels. But they had the opportunity through various sections of the Maritime Transport Act to either increase to 1,000 or 2,000. That's quite interesting. I'm just aware this is playing out at the moment. But I do know, just if I can just update on what's happening at a government level, that the government are proposing, the Ministry of Transport are proposing to increase the level of fines to $3,000. So where that lands, that's still on pipework, and of course, as we know, that we have an election on at the moment, and so possibly a change of government that I'm not sure what the outcome of that's going to be. And as a result, there are a number of regions that are reviewing their bylaws at the moment, based on on the outcome, which will give us a bit of a steer as to what we should be shooting for.
Okay. Councillor McDonald, Councillor Roy, Councillor Cook, Councillor Cotton. Thank you.
And yeah, very good. Really appreciate the timely nature of this paper. So I've been getting a lot of commentary in his family. So yeah, putting something in line that lines up with the community's expectations. A $200 fine certainly does not do that. So again, thank you very much for this timely response.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Roy.
Yeah, well, my question's largely been answered because we don't have the authority to set the penalties. They're done by order in council and when you said there's some considerations going on. So the Minister of Transport will set them by order in council and affirmed by the Regulations Review Select Committee. It would occur to me that probably the thing we should be doing is writing to the Minister about the incident and expressing our concerns and giving some substance, actually increasing fines for misdemeanors and offering to contribute.
Councillor Cook.
Yeah, I'd be happy to move the recommendations, Chair, because I think it's timely to get that review underway. But I just ask, how many times have we actually used those regulations in the last few years, like since 2009?
We haven't conducted any reviews since 2009.
I mean, how often have we used the regulations to deal with issues?
Not that I can be confident that there isn't been a number of them. This was the major one recently. There was a similar incident in March or a few months prior to the Riverton incident in Lake Tiana. This is where there's a source of frustration as Maritime New Zealand, we have the delegated authority from them to conduct them. Where do we sit? So when it comes to enforcement considerations and who takes the lead and who doesn't, that incident in Lake Tiana where there's people injuries there at Maritime New Zealand indicated that. The severity of the Riverton incident wasn't on that same level, but Maritime New Zealand initially investigated and then handed back to us. So
it's fair to say we're not regularly using the bylaw, but it's important that it's fit for purpose when we do need to use it, I suppose.
Yes.
So can I just ask, Chair, if we do a review of the regulations, do we make a recommendation to the central authority about what level they should be at, and then they'll tell us what we can have? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so the bylaw, the substantive part of the bylaw we can review as part of our own process, but when it comes to the infringement levels, then that's obviously set. We set our infringement levels in line with that as part of the bylaw. But if we're making any separate recommendations to central government, as Councillor Royce suggested, that even a potential of a 3,000 fine may or may not meet what we consider as acceptable, we could could write to central government to at least suggest that could go higher. But that's obviously the council's call. But the predominant process is that we review our own bylaw, but obviously align that with the infringement levels set by the Ministry of Transport.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Guyton, and then we've got Councillor Gibson and Chairman Horrell.
Thank you. You're pleased to hear about this progress. I've got a couple of questions. The first is, you mentioned another council which made a paltry advance on. Any idea why that would have been the case?
No, but that will be a question I will raise at our next harbour master to get together with the other regions to see what was the thinking of the report process behind that.
I'll be interested. And the second thing is, there's been a lot of media coverage, very entertaining in its way, engaging at least, but entertaining. How have we fared, do you feel, in terms of things that were said in those programs?
Probably I'm best to answer that one in the sense that I think from the very outset we'd endeavoured to investigate this as thoroughly as possible, and indeed we reviewed our decision twice before we finalised our decision to not prosecute. It didn't meet the thresholds for prosecution, but certainly allowed us to look at an infringement. I'm quite confident that as an organisation we did a really good job of that, and we've got professional investigators that do that as part of our work. Where I suppose it's well documented. When the the only course of action was an infringement. And when we looked at that as a $200 fine and then weighed that up against the severity of the incident, I think I've been quite clear that wasn't good enough in terms of, or at least the level of infringement didn't feel correct. I made that very clear to the family directly, and so this resulted in me undertaking this work with Lyndon to come to you to say at some point in the future, which is today, that we really should undertake our review. So I think we work well with Maritime New Zealand in terms of the investigations. I think we are more than competent to do these investigations. I don't doubt that in any way, but certainly if we can improve our bylaw and improve the infringement fines, then I think this would be a learning that's come out of this incident that has given us an opportunity to make improvements, and we always should be looking at the ways we can improve our work.
Thanks, Paul. Councillor Gibson.
Madam Chair, I'll give it right in. The financial implications, you'll come back with an estimate of costs of doing this? And they will be what?
The review of bylaw in terms of the internal staff work would be met through existing budgets. In terms of the consultation, the indicative suggestion is that we align that with our consultation of the LTP, so we get efficiencies, I suppose, through that. I'm not envisaging significant costs to update to review the bylaw that wouldn't be covered by existing.
I do see the legal advice and including a review of the navigation safety bylaws.
They're coming out of previous budget and my budget.
So existing budgets should cover this work.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell, sorry, I'm just needing some energy for my device.
Yes, Madam Chair, a couple of questions. I'm assuming the $200 more minor things. So ideally, we do want higher level and some discretion in between, because over the years we have seen some fairly serious incidences on events. $200, from environmental matters, is not high enough to correct behaviour change. So I'm right behind the review and having the problems that have been mentioned. I mean, we also did lobby the minister and went up to the RMA changes about the infringement of $1,000 for actually sharing probably a similar situation.
Thanks, Chairman. Linda, do you want to say something?
Just in response to Councillor Horrell, and I can update the rest of the council as well. I'm aware that in 2021, the Ministry of Transport, they released a categorisation tool. That's a proposal they've put forward, and that would look at severity of expected harm from once that tool, if it comes to fruition, that'd be of benefit to navigation safety bylaws to be able to moderate what events we can apply.
Excellent. Councillor Pemberton, did you still have a question?
Yeah, I guess we're reviewing the fine system, but are we going far enough into protecting Southland? And I'm just full of experience, and not just Southland Lakes, but there's times a year where you decide not to actually take the boat out with a family for water skiing and such like, because all rules have been broken. There's no education. People look like seals, and the swimmers included. We're not doing a lot as a community to protect ourselves, and I'm amazed that we are not seeing a larger number of incidences. I think it's just pure luck, to be honest, because there's some stuff that just looks some days.
Yeah, I think lots of us would agree, but I'm not sure it's our purview to try and get people to have. Yeah, but it's not a conversation for this recommendations. Point, but Lyndon, you might have something to say.
Well, I can say and support that our team do an amazing job, and fortunately, we can't be everywhere at once. Southland is a large region, but we do take every opportunity to provide voting safety education. We have certain hotspots, like Tiana is one of them, and we identify, for example, ski lanes as a major issue. So we're physically out on the water monitoring those ski lanes. But we do have our own, we need to have our own time off as well, but.
Yeah. I guess that's what I'm not saying that they're not doing the job. I'm just wondering if Southland is resourcing enough in the space.
Certainly an opportunity for us as we go through to an LTP.
Yeah.
We have, I think it's clear there's a huge coastline, lots of inland lakes, and an opportunity for us to look at that in terms of, and our, I suppose our activity reporting around the Harbour Master comes through the regulatory committee, but maybe there's a potential update some of the work we do through to regional services.
Councillor Cook, are you still happy to move the recommendations? Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you. Councillor Rodway, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. Thanks for that very timely action. Item 3 is the natural hazards portal. Welcome to the table, Gavin. I'll just read the recommendation while you magic over there. The recommendation is to receive the report and the demonstration of the portal. Perhaps I can just make it clear that this is a demonstration of what is existing. I'm not sure whether Gavin's up for feedback or not at this point. I don't think so. Yes, thank you. Lucy?
So through you, Chair,
Thank you, people. Councillors.
Sorry, through you, Chair, just whilst Gavin and the team are just sorting the show and tell that we're going to be giving you of the portal. So you'll be aware this was a long-term plan target to make our hazard information more readily available to the community. We're doing that in a variety of different ways, and Gavin and the team have been working through a few of those LTP levels of service, including some town summaries and a number of other matters, and the portal is just one of those. So interesting timing in terms of a national piece of information has also recently been launched from EQC, also called a portal, but there are different things. And so Gav is going to show you what we've been doing and explain a little about how it all fits together and what the role and the function of the team is in terms of providing this information to our community. The portal's not live to the public yet. We wanted to give you all early eyes on during this meeting, and there's still some testing, but we're hoping that we'll be finalising and releasing before the end of the month. So Gav is in his chair and Adrian's assisting him, so I will hand back over there.
Yes. So the portal's it's the first iteration of the portal. As information improves, we can add to it. So the intent is to get information more readily available to the public without having to go through staff members. Press play, Adrian, please. Yep. Right. Well, that was quick. So a disclaimer came up, so they've got to click a disclaimer to access the portal, and then there's some instructions on use, which is just going through. So basically, you start by searching a property address, which it's then it'll locate their property as a yellow dot, and then the user selects a shape around the area, which will then pull relevant data through to the portal. Then, so the first lot of information is the flood hazard mapping. So, and below that, it'll bring in relevant photos to the locality, so you can open them up. You can also save them. And you can also search the photos by date, so you could, so and that'll just bring up photos for that, say, particular year. Right, so that's a link through to the explanation, the hazard data for in the Invercargill City District Plan, because this example was in Gladstone. And then the next link is that was through to Environment Southland's flood protection page. Right, so it's going quite fast. Can you just pause it? Sorry. Yeah, seems to be going fast. Okay, so the next lot of information's on tsunami hazard. So that with coloured dots around it of New Zealand, that's the 2021 National Tsunami Hazard Model. So that's basically saying, well, in that small text, so the Invercargill section of coast. So yeah, so it gives tsunami heights for 20k sections of coast around New Zealand. So that's saying for the Invercargill section of coast, the 2500 year return period, 84th percentile tsunami heights 9 meters high. And then we're bringing below that, we're in the orange evacuation zone that EMS publishes. So yeah, we definitely need to have updated mapping for tsunami evacuation zone in the Invercargill area.
So you're saying that it's going to come right up there. Is that off the Pusica Trench?
Well, this, yeah, so there's Pusica Trench or, yeah, so there are some near source tsunami risks, and there's Peru as well. So, yeah, so the current evacuation modelling, mapping, sorry, is relatively coarse. And the modelling that was done for New River Estuary in 2010, because of the March 2011 tsunami event in Japan, that they basically decided to throw out the findings of that modelling before it was finalised, because the Japanese event just threw all their assumptions out. So did that answer your question, Councillor? Yep, yep.
So the 2010 one that showed that it didn't quite get to the buildings on TY at that time, I remember seeing it.
Yeah, and there was a bit of overtopping into Stead Street, but I think the Japanese event changed assumptions on how it went up estuaries and rivers, and yeah, it was the speed of the tsunami was faster than previously thought. So yes, there is a need for updated modelling.
We had an emergency management for the Alpine Fault selection, and 100 people came to that, but the majority of the questions were about tsunami.
Yep.
That's what people around the coast were concerned about.
Yes, and it is a real risk that a lot of people don't think of in New Zealand. Thanks, Aidan. Right, yeah, so that's a link through to Civil Defence's Get Ready website for tsunami. And then the next link is there's an article on local source tsunamis in the South Island. And then there's a YouTube clip of Craig Sinclair. It's about 16 minutes long, discussing the Southland risk, the tsunami risk in Southland. Next up, we've got some seismic hazard mapping, the ground shaking amplification risk, and also liquefaction risk. So yeah, so you can interrogate that for more information by clicking on the layers. And then there's a link because Invercargill City have they updated. Yeah, they had a liquefaction assessment in 2021, so that links through to that later information in the report and liquefaction guidance on ICC's website. Next up, we have coastal hazards. So that area is mapped as an area at risk from sea level rise and storm surge, the basis of that being below 3 meters above mean sea level. So
See on the map is sort of Blue Cliff, the whale, part of that, have they not done yet, or is that, I'm just looking at that coloured area?
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's the PGF LiDAR, so, so there's a link through to, what was actually a summary on coastal hazard in Southland done for the review of the coastal plan. It's good discussion. Link through to the New Zealand Sea Rise website, which that was released last year, I believe. So that shows vertical land movement predictions around the New Zealand coast, and so you can search that, and then there's the various sea level rise predictions. So that's quite a lot of information for people. The next link is so that's a link through to the brand's website. So that's probably good for architectural designers. Well, I'll use it anyway, but it's just a link to it. So that gives all the various ratings for their purposes. Yeah, there's a link through to Emergency Management Southland's website, and then a link through to the EQC Hazards portal, which was released last month. So yeah, first up, so I'll search that property in Gladstone again. Yeah, so this part of the portal shows settled claims with EQC since 1997. So yeah, so that property hasn't had any claims, which we can see there. But if we go to a nearby property, we can see there was a claim for earthquake damage in 2007. So that's settled claims only, and it's just EQC claims. So potentially people could have gone through private insurers, which that information won't be there. So the other information on the EQC portal is quite high level. It links back to regional council websites, which at the moment it's linking through to Beacon Hazards layer, which will get that updated to link through to the portal when we have it live. And then there's some more high level information on various hazards, but not particularly at the property scale. Okay, so I'm searching another property. Another thing that we'll continually update is, so we're creating town summaries. So if people search an area, which I'm searching a property on just to the east of Winton, it'll come up with that, the summary for that area. So that's hoped to provide a good discussion that people can give to their insurance companies, etc. So again, I'm just showing that local photos to the area, and it's something we have to improve, but you have to go through and physically click the town summary that's brought up.
Do insurance companies have other portals for gathering information, or are they going to use this one?
Well, yeah, so there have been a few interesting insurance inquiries recently. So the IAG group of insurers, they're using a company called Risk Management Services, which are an American-based firm to provide them hazards data. So where they're drawing their data from, I'm unsure at this stage. We actually have, we've reached out to IAG, and we're going to have a meeting to discuss what information they're using versus, are they tapping into the available information on council websites here, or are they doing their own modelling?
We monetize their use of our.
Well,
capitalist approach.
Yeah, I'm all for getting information out there so the community is aware of it. So just to speak on insurance, I had an inquiry a week before last. So there was somebody in Gimballet Terrace, and they've been given a letter by Tower Insurance, which is one of the IAG group of insurance companies. And it was, they were basically saying that they were not renewing their insurance, and it gave them the name of an insurance broker to go find insurance with another company. So it's a Gimlet Street, it's downstream of the spillway on the Waihopai Dam. But it was one of the properties, there's a lot of properties in Gimlet Street that were developed after the 84 flood, but before the construction of the flood protection scheme. And the solution then was to fill the properties. So this is one of those filled properties, which the recent modelling we've got shows water in the on the street, the property's filled, so it's flood free. So provided the gentleman that information, he was quite happy because he could go back to the insurance company and say that their information was incorrect. So
I've got some councillors with questions on the list, so can yours join the queue, or is it?
Oh, yeah, no.
I'll add you to the list. Thank you, councillor.
So this is there's a link on the portal through to the available PGF LiDAR ground height information. So here I've zoomed into Environment Southland. So first up, we can see 1 metre contour intervals. So the information we have, people be able to see 1 metre contour intervals across the area that we've got. And then you can change in urban environments. We've got it set up so you can select a 0.2 metre contour interval.
Just councillor.
And I don't think I've done on this video. You can just click on a point and it'll bring up the height for that location. Yeah. So that at the moment we'll have available that big eastern chunk of Southland and basically area around Oban that got LiDAR. So this is the portal overview. So there's access. So if people want more information, they can then use we have got the natural hazards inquiry form. So I've got to populate certain things like the location and some contact details. So that'll basically be created as an IRIS request and sent to staff to follow up. There's links through to like our climate resilience program page. This is a link through to the NIWA fire risk website. It's a link through to Environment South of Contaminated Land web page, which you can then link through to the Contaminated Land Register. Often when we get inquiries about a property, it'll be for natural hazards and contaminated land. Exactly, councillor. That concludes my presentation.
That's pretty amazing, actually. Anyway, in the interest of moving on, we've got councillor Evans, councillor McDonald, councillor Gibson, and then me. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, through you, Madam Chair. A lot of the earlier stuff is already on Beacon anyway.
This is to make it, yes, sorry, councillor. This is, I suppose, we're pulling information from other councils' websites, and so it's providing a central point of data, and probably more information that's currently available on the Beacon.
And the other thing is you need to be mindful that it's understanding the papers, you don't want to overload them with information, but there is a hell of a lot of information here. And as you're saying, the relevance of it with regards to some insurance companies is negligible. They don't include our information in their decision making, and they have every right to. But with regards to LiDAR and the future of LiDAR that we're doing with tsunami, coastal, can I ask, can we look at LiDAR for coast, for inland tsunamis for communities like Manapori, Te Anau. As you understand, Te Anau is a delta. If there was a movement of certain cubic kilometres of soil, one way can wipe out the whole town, or same with Manapori, and the same with a lot of other communities like inland.
There was so Environment Southland commissioned a GNS assessment of Te Anau and Manapori in 2013, I believe, from memory. So I think that that showed the risk for Te Anau itself wasn't too bad. There was areas like the Worsley Delta and that were, you know, if you're the hut on the delta there, you could be in trouble. So I'd have to look and come back to you, councillor, but I think the GNS's assessment was the risk to Te Anau itself wasn't that.
I would suggest with some aggression of building on the delta, so the risk is extremely high with inland tsunami. But also you had your link that went to, sorry, Manager, that went to the Brands site.
Yeah.
Will that be used by for permits, consents?
That's general information that people have to provide for their building consent application. So it's got things like rainfall intensity and well, I suppose they have like coastal erosion zones and things like that.
And we'll be specifically looking at the information on the site as a guidance towards whether people can consent or not. Because I know situations where people have wanted to build and there's no historical flooding. There's no photos because the photos are off big and everything, but they were still told that they would get a section.
Section 73 building act notice.
Which is a bit of an odd one, considering there's no historical and no LiDAR and no proof of anything. So do we take this information as the legal and go over that?
Yes, I said coastal erosion before I meant coastal corrosion. Like the team spend quite a bit of time providing individual site assessments, and that sometimes includes looking at properties where there's no we haven't got clear information like flood photos, but and our floodplain mapping, the flaw with it is it's currently only on the major waterways and their tributaries, significant tributaries. There's a lot of smaller waterways which there's some pose an obvious flood risk which aren't mapped, and but there is a risk from them if people are building in close proximity.
So thank you for that, Kevin. Thank you, Madam Chair. It gives everyone a bit more confidence, hopefully, this important.
Councillor McDonald.
Sorry, I don't think I finished the question completely, Madam Chair. Sometimes people don't like what they're told, but like I said, my job is reducing the risk to community over time. So we want to move people from building in risky places, so the risk profile for the community is reduced over time, not increased.
Good point. Councillor McDonald.
Thanks for that. It's very visible, wasn't it? When you go stretch this out, see that your property is in a shaded area. Well, it gets serious very quick, doesn't it? Because we think about, all of a sudden we start to think about the value of our asset, of our property. Can this work be used to drive, I'm thinking immediately, to drive engagement around our infrastructure, push around flood management, as part of the villages? Because everyone's sitting back, are we to take the lead on this work, or do we let individual insurance companies take the lead on it? So if we use this to say that here, this is the reality of this property. It could be a house in town, or it could be a property that sits in the floodplain that they're trying to sell for a premium price, and it's in one of these shaded areas. I think this is a good driver of what we would like to get that engagement going.
Well, one of the main things the summaries will comment on is the actual risk profile of a property if it's on the floodplain. So a lot of properties are protected by flood protection, and it's the standard of flood protection which determines the actual risk to their property. So, yeah, I think we need to be proactive in our infrastructure management. If we leave everything to the insurance companies to drive change, well, it's going to cost people. There's, like I had the example, if they were refusing to renew insurance, had another example, and what so it was the floodplain behind in the main town of Gore, so protected by stock banks, and the insurance company was raising their premium from 2,000 to 5,000, and also indicated this was just the start of the increases. And again, I could help that person that was right on the edge of the floodplain, so and their property actually rose up, and then the house was built off the high corner of the property, so they would have got some water on the backyard and the garage, but the house itself would be flood free in the event of a stock bank.
So just
collapse or over
so it makes really good sense for us to provide that blanket protection across full communities, as opposed to every individual land and house owner having to deal with their own insurance around this new climate information that's coming in and how that's incorporated.
Yes, Council. Like if people can't get insurance, they possibly can't get a mortgage. There's big ramifications. So if we're not providing a good standard of protection, the option is going to be to retreat in some areas, which is going to be costly. So.
Councillor Gibson, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Good information, really good. But what's troubling me a little bit is that we've got to be, well, you tell me whether we've got to be aware of our legal position if we get it wrong under climate change, the way it's going on, and looking in the North Island. Do we put a disclaimer on all this so we don't have a liability coming back to us?
Yes, it is. Disclaimers on both the portal and on the use of the LiDAR information. So basically the disclaimer for the LiDAR is if the use of the information relies on, well, if the accuracy is critical, go get it confirmed by a site survey.
So you're putting the legal liability on them. Okay.
Yeah. And well, when we're providing information, we're trying to provide the best information we've got, but that's not perfect. And before we had LiDAR in some areas, with the LiDAR has been a huge asset to just recently to give better information to people. So.
Thanks, Chairman Horrell. Last one.
Yes, I think we've had a previous discussion on the information these insurance companies are using, which I think is satellite imagery. Accuracy is, I guess, question. We'll have a discussion during the OT on flood protection lines. The story we can tell with the LiDAR is actually quite valuable to people. That while it may not be from a reliability point of view, its accuracy is far better than anything else. It has been in the past, so it might be a way of actually promoting this to people to.
Thanks. Just before I ask for somebody to move that recommendation, just like to highlight the fact that the portal will make, hopefully, the number of personal phone calls to Gavin a lot less, because some of that information will be able to be gathered by the constituents themselves and free Gavin up to do the other work that he also needs to do. So hopefully it looks pretty comprehensive and pretty helpful. So hopefully that will be some of the outcome for you, Gavin. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Thanks, Councillor Rodway. Seconded, Councillor Cook. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Gavin. That's amazing. And the team who made internet magic happen. Right, item 4. Gosh. Science update. Thanks, Nuwan. And just while we're getting sorted, I think we'll keep questions for Nuwan till the end, please, so that we can cover that all off at once. Let him get through his presentation. Lucy, Rachel, want to say anything? As an introductory thing?
So through you, Chair, this is essentially part of a series of updates on the science program. You might recall last time around we heard from Darren May on the Aparima at Thornbury site. This time the focus is on a lakes monitoring program and some new information that's come through. So I'd like to introduce Nguyen to you, who I know you've met previously, who leads this program for us. Thanks, Nguyen.
Take it away.
Yes, so early this year, we engaged the Hawthorne Institute to review our lakes monitoring program. And this item presents the key findings of that review, as well as an update on the daphnia situation in lakes Tiana and Manapuri. Right, so if we first look at lakes in Southland region, according to the freshwater ecosystems of New Zealand database, 26% or 991 lakes in Aotearoa, New Zealand are located in the Southland region. And the present review has identified 2 additional lakes that were previously misclassified as being within the West Coast region, but are in fact located within Southland. However, in the current review, it has been found that 40 of these 993 lakes do not meet the criteria for classification as lake. Therefore, it is suggested that the number should be revised down to 953 lakes in that region. In addition, the study has identified at least 10 water bodies that meet the criteria of a lake, but are currently not included in FENS database. So further investigation is required to confirm their status before classifying those water bodies as lakes. Next, the current state of region's lakes. As part of the Lake 380 projects, Lake 380 project is a 5-year research project that has been collected data from 10% of New Zealand's lakes within an aim to improve our understanding of the environmental, social, and cultural histories of those lakes. So as part of this project, surface sediment samples were collected from 41 lakes in the Southland region to estimate sediment bacteria trophic index. Sediment bacterial trophic index is a method that uses bacterial RNA sequestration to characterize the bacterial community in lake surface sediment, from which the percentage of key indicator bacteria associated with different trophic levels were used to estimate lake trophic index or lake health state. So the results of these 41 lakes were then used to model bacterial trophic index for the remaining lakes in the region, incorporating lake characteristics and catchment land use data. So as you can see in this graph, the final results indicate that the majority of our lakes are in oligotropic or good condition, with 12 lakes identified as being in supertrophic or very poor condition. Here in these 2 graphs, the first graph, the left side graph displays the relationship between bacterial trophic index and their corresponding Southland lake classes. And as you observe, the majority of our lowland shallow lakes and brackish lakes are in eutrophic or supertrophic state. So while the next one illustrates the connection between catchment land use and the lake bacterial trophic index, the land use data reveals that most of the eutrophic and supertrophic lakes have a high percentage of developed land or high production exotic grassland in their catchment. Next, update on invasive zooplankton in Lake Tiana and Manapuri. as you may be aware, a substantial increase in invasive zooplankton Daphnia was observed in these two lakes over the last summer. And it is believed to have occurred due to change in either fish or phytoplankton communities in those two ecosystems. Since then, monthly quantitative zooplankton sampling has been carried out in both lakes, and the latest results indicate decline in Daphnia abundance in both lakes, so that's good. However, still the numbers are not quite within the normal range. Therefore, our intention is to continue with quantitative zooplankton sampling with the aim of gaining better understanding of their seasonal variations and to identify potential ecological impacts and implications.
No, just ask, is that Daphnia, is that a native?
This particular species is invasive, but we got native species too. But yes, it is a Daphnia pulex or pulicaria. It's an invasive species. Yeah. Okay, so the messages, based on the recent review, further work is needed to accurately identify and categorize lakes and wetlands in the region, and also to identify all lakes within the region. Then Lake 380 data reveal clear relationship between land use and lake trophic level, with lakes having a higher percentage of developed land in their catchment exhibiting poor health condition. The study identified 12 lakes that failed to achieve the national bottom line, therefore required an action plan to improve the condition of those 12 lakes. Then currently, only 0.7% of lakes in the region are monitored through our State of the Environment Lakes Monitoring Program. And also, current monitoring program does not include all the national compulsory attributes for lakes. For example, lake submerged plant index and E. coli at primary contact sites are not included in our current monitoring program. Therefore, a thorough program review is required to optimize our current lake monitoring program and to ensure the program is fit for purpose. That's all.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Morrison, then Councillor Rodway. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm interested in, as you are thinking about the future monitoring needs for our lakes, will, in a similar fashion to our future monitoring of other waterways, taking a Hawara-led approach and bringing in some Mataranga Maori perspectives to our monitoring, will that be something that we consider strengthening our lake monitoring program in the future?
Exactly. Yes, so that's the plan. Actually, they include those Hawara principles as well as include some historical or culturally important needs to our lake monitoring program. Yes.
That's a good question. Councillor Rodway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you for that report. I'm interested in the algorithms or mechanisms underneath the modelling that you use to categorise most of the lakes. You've only sampled 41, I think, out of all of these. There are many lakes in Fiordland where there's no development of any kind that are mesotrophic. And wonder how that could be arrived at, because the right side, others that are microtrophic and oligotrophic. So that sort of suggests to me that the program or the modeling method that you use is not perfect.
Yeah, no, that's right. Actually, the reason is actually the model underrepresents low altitude reference sites. That's why some of the lakes in Fiordland area, particularly all these lakes, we have identified 57 lakes in Dockland that shows mesotrophic or the eutrophic condition. So yeah, that's the misclassification. The reason is actually the underrepresentation of the And go to the next slide, sorry, I got a slide, yeah. So, yeah, for the higher trophic state, actually, the model deviates from.
Oh, we've got it on the papers, Adrian. Yeah.
Yeah, so the model deviates from the 1 to 1 years. So, yeah, that which means actually we need more data.
So further to that, and following on from Councillor Morrison's question, it would seem to me that those lakes that are hypertrophic or eutrophic, the ones that we should worry about the most, rather than these ones over in Fjorden, which are likely, as you say, likely misclassified and most likely. I think you're right. So working to identify the causes, specific causes for the eutrophic condition of these lowland lakes would seem to me to be perhaps the highest priority in terms of work on lakes. Would that be right?
Yes, that's right. Actually, I've got 30K from Environment grant to look into those, particularly the lowland lake, but particularly to identify drivers, what would be the drivers of these lowland lake, the eutrophic conditions. Yes, so probably I work into that the project.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks. Would like to move that report? Thank you, Councillor Cox. Seconded Councillor Evans. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Stuart. Excuse me, councillors, I just have, yeah, please come. I just have to sort this out.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, so we'll go to. Yeah, no worries. Thanks for raising it. Thanks, sorry about that, folks. Righto, item 5 is the climate change community resilience update. Welcome, Anka.
Rena, how's it going this morning? We've got a climate change update for you, and we've got a bit of an unusual step of having a supplementary item being provided to you at the moment by Dave. You recall that on the 9th of August, we had a climate change council workshop, and as part of this, we traversed a number of climate change related items, but one of the key ones was the principles and aspirations, the draft principles and aspirations for the 2 key foundational components of the regional climate change strategy. So as part of that, the nature of that workshop experience was replicated across all of the agencies during August. And then on the 31st of August, the Regional Climate Change Interagency Group had a workshop to gather all that feedback together and take a stock take of how they could be refined further. And so what's being handed out to you right now is the latest version. It's going to go forward as the 2 key components of the regional climate change strategy, which we're in the process of drafting at the moment. So while this couldn't be included as part of the agenda for today, this is just really for your information in the meantime. And the idea is that we'll put it formally forward as part of the agenda for the October strategy and policy meeting, and formally seek some resolution on that as part of the October meeting. But in the meantime, given that we are the stage where we're at, we just thought it might be of interest to councillors to receive it as a supplementary item. And in terms of the rest of the briefing, the subcommittee, we've now got a confirmed date for to have the next climate change subcommittee on the same day as strategy and policy in October. And as part of that, the timing of that should work out quite well, as we'll be able to present the GHG organisational baseline report to you as part of that subcommittee meeting. And so key step that needs to happen between now and then is verification, which is happening at the end of September. And so that should mean that that report will be ready to be presented at the subcommittee meeting in October for discussion. So that's something to look forward to. And then the last thing to note probably is the fact that the council will be familiar with the climate change perception survey, where we've run a couple of pilots of that. That's being rolled out next week. I'm looking at Rachel for confirmation. And so rolled out to the community next week. And the idea is that that will be open for community feedback for 4 weeks as a minimum. And then we'll just see how that goes in terms of what kinds of feedback we get from that and what that will mean for some of the other climate change related discussions we had at the 9th of February in terms of communications and what that means from here. So I can probably take the rest of the briefing as read, though happy to take questions on any aspect of the briefing.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald and then Councillor Goshen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Very good. I've just got a couple of questions. We're talking about organisational net zero. Doesn't seem to be any reference to interim targets here, but will we discuss an interim target out of that organisational measurement, greenhouse gas measurement from the 18th?
Yes, that's definitely what we're working towards at the moment, is trying to do pull together some initial thinking of what a interim target could be, and to have some sort of at least high level discussion about that at the 18th.
I'm just one more thing. I just noticed at the bottom of the report, compared to reference to the slow. Are we going to have any briefing on that? Exactly what that means, what that project's going to entitle? Has that been run through the climate change and therefore through this committee?
Through you, Chair. So it was touched on, I can't remember if you were there, Councillor McDonald, but the last LTP workshop where we were talking about floodplain management, Alan Lawton spoke about it briefly then, but we're certainly happy to have further discussion. I don't know, Paul, if there's anything further you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I think probably it's a long, well, not a long term, but it's got a long reach to it. And probably progress against it should be best reported through legal services would be an idea. But we did climate change committee, subcommittee as well as possible.
The interagency group.
I think you can go into two different. One to the regional services and one to that. Probably a good idea.
Councillor Goshen.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. I just as an aside, I agree that that particular slow flow program is one that's very positive from a Hamlet's point of view, and from our own. I think it's a visionary thing. My question though was, at the time when the smoking of tobacco was being recognised as a health hazard, the tobacco industry put a lot of money into pulling people believing in their product. The oil industry, the coal industry are presently doing the same thing with regard to climate change. They're active agents, I believe, to stop progress with climate change action designed to stop climate change. These things exist. In all of our discussions, either amongst ourselves or in the interagency discussions, is the concept of agents actively working against what we're doing ever free?
Councillor Morrison.
Approached. Certainly, we are sensitive to the fact that there are individuals across our communities, and some of them representative councils across the region, that are less convinced of anthropogenic climate change or the cause or drivers of climate change. The members of the working group are aware of this issue, because some of those individuals on the working group have folk in their respective councils that the moment that starts. Pleasing to say that within the working group, there doesn't seem to be any folk who subscribe heavily to that viewpoint, which enables us as a working group to, with relative freedom, progress the discussions around what's needed to future-proof Southland in the face of climate change. I guess as we frame the strategy, of which these two important components will be a central feature, as we frame that strategy and the subsequent framework for action, we will need to be aware of those competing perspectives and be able to respond to and or accommodate those within our community engagements as we take the mahi forward. So we're not blind to it, I guess is what we're saying, but also, you know, we appreciate that, you know, we kind of got to move on, we've got to get things moving. So mindful, deliberate action. And one of the members used the analogy, you know, you don't know if your house is going to burn down or when it burned down, you still take out fire insurance to insure your house against risk. And we need to take a similar precautionary approach with respect to climate change. We need to act as if it is a real and present risk and respond accordingly.
Thanks. Could I just follow up? I appreciate your comments about the council all level of engagement, but I'm talking about industry with vested interests that are actively trying to foil this kind of development. So I don't expect you to respond, but I'm talking about industry, and these are industry that affects us locally, particularly agriculture.
And just to flag that this working group is representative of the 4 councils and Te Aomara Incorporated. Beyond 2025 strategy has indicated there's a need for a Southland regional climate change forum of some shape, which we envisage may include the opportunity to include other stakeholders, including industry stakeholders. So at that point, when we start those conversations, it'll be interesting to see if if that's a problem. Noting that some industry players will say one thing and act in a different fashion, we need to be sensitive to that issue as well.
Thanks, Councillor. That's a good explanation. Any other questions? Right. Just to say, I'm sure the councillors all appreciate that it hasn't been easy to get to this point. So thank you, and looking forward to reading it thoroughly in time for the next meeting rather than debating it right this minute. And I would also like to highlight the youth engagement mechanism that you've mentioned in the report. I think that's a good start. Many other ways that can happen also. Did you want to comment?
I was going to say, perhaps this is a bit of a milestone to achieve these principles and these provisional aspirations.
Yes, so well done, those who participated and guided. Somebody like to move the receipt of that report, please. Thank you, Kevin Horrell, seconded Councillor Morrison. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks very much, team. And item 6, water and land portfolio update. Welcome, Liz. Councillors, just reminding you that we are receiving the report. Thank you.
This is an update report, so the calculations that we noted we'll see. So it's an update of what we're working on the water and land space. The proposed plan appeal process is still continuing. Since the last meeting, we've received the 8th interim decision. There's been a appeal to High Court in relation to that decision. So that is, we give yet to have a date set down for that appeal. But we, as you know, notice saying that we will be party to it should we get to that stage. The court has given us direction, however, that they will be hoping to get a decision out relatively soon on Appendix 10. So they'll separate that from the appeal process. We're looking forward to that, hopefully before the end of the month. Tahi work is continuing, and we're hoping to start engagement out into the community very soon, in October. we've got a workshop planned to update some of our stakeholders on where we're at and what's coming up. Farm plan work is also continuing. We'll have a conversation about that later on this afternoon. But since we last met, there's been a lot of work on the CCCBs. The training program is taking a huge amount of time and effort, and it's an amazing product. So there's training for assessors at the moment and with certifiers at national level, but a lot of work being done on the regional training, setting up workshop for internal work for our local people to work down here with us, and also developing a starter pack. So wanting to create that's a summary of the report. Any part-time or
Councillor Morrison.
Do you have a sense for how much interest is being shown by folk to engage to be qualified as certifiers? Is there strong interest emerging?
So I understand we've got over 20 who have any more than that?
No, yeah.
But
also likely to we're going to have more sessions, so there's going to be more.
Yeah.
More disappointing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Business Right Way through you, Chair, we have I think 20 people who've registered for the first training. The companies might recall that we have put under a restriction on the first training so we can deliver it. We can make sure we've got the processes right and get feedback from people. And then there will be at least one more training. It'll sort of be open once we get past the training, and there'll be other training obviously.
John, sorry, Councillor Pemberton.
Just clarify, my wife was actually applied for one of those roles, but just a question. Regionally, have we got consistency around certifiers being going through the process? Is there consistency across the regions? No, it's just something that's been raised. Maybe.
So through you, Chair, I'm just probably needing to understand what we mean by consistency. But what I would say is that all people who are applying to be certifiers will do the same national training. So the national training modules online are the same. Then they will go through a module process in Southland, and I think they're going through that in Waikato as well, and that's for the regional trainings. And then there's a third element, and there is a little bit of distinction here in that although I think we're both Waikato and Southland are doing a workshop, and that workshop is just to really make sure we build confidence and knowledge that the certifiers understand our regional setting, both from a resource point of view and a regulatory point of view. So there will be some inherent differences at that point.
I guess my point is the difference between the example that's shown to me was a 45-minute session with Waikato versus 8 hours here. I'm not saying we want to cut corners,
right,
but first cab off the rank. Are we making sure we're not putting up too many barriers to ruffle everyone at the start?
So 8 hours is definitely that's not correct. So, and we haven't held one of these workshops yet. But also, can I just comment, I guess, councillors to be aware that obviously we're in a slightly different space in Southland in terms of information coming from our proposed plan and the sort of readiness of our proposed plan, whereas Waikato have got a bit more work to do in that space before they're ready to land there. So again, it's that building that information and knowledge base in our certifiers.
Lucy, did you want to comment?
Yeah, just very briefly, thanks, Chair. So the Waikato example, my understanding is that they're going to be doing an on-farm session as well, which would, I'm assuming the 8 hours refers to a whole day workshop. That's one of our choices to make, is how we've regionalised the training for us. Waikato are talking about doing something similar, but it will be on farm, so they might just not have gotten the details of that part out yet. So I think just to add to Fiona's comments there, I think that might be some of those things. But yeah, the national stuff and then the regional.
Thanks. Thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, I just want to talk about the corporate farmer that I talked to the other day and said, just made a passing comment, as long as it's reasonably similar to the Canterbury experience, everything will be fine. So that was just a passing comment. I think it's really important here that we don't get away from the fact that these plans have to be engaged on by all levels by the person that's developing them. So if you don't develop them yourself and it's just over the top and you put it to one side and you pay for someone else to develop, all of the time, it's just being forgotten about in that process. It's just not going to work, is it? Because someone's got to write it themselves. They've got to be invested in it. So how do we get that balance right between that level of completion and complexity that's required in a form that people feel confident to start moving on themselves? Farmers know, for example, they know their own farms. It's all up there and they can put it down there. So I think that's really important. If there is some provisions within that plan that don't have to be upfront straight away, that can be brought in year 2 and year 3, maybe we need to look at that, because upfront engagement is the most important thing I've considered on that. So I guess you've thought about all these sorts of things.
Yeah, look, just a couple of quick comments in relation to that, Councillor McDonald. So the first thing is these plans have to be owned by the landowner, by the farmer. We're really focused on that, and that is quite a distinct difference, I feel, from my understanding of some of the processes in Canterbury that have gone before this, and it was a learning from the Canterbury process. So they have to be owned by the landowner. So to do that, we have to make these farm plans so that actually the landowners can do them themselves, so that they can have ownership. And so that's a key part of the support mechanisms that will come in. Now, just councils will recall we're in a busy period for farming right now, so it's not a high priority to try and work with farmers at this point in time, but that's coming from October onwards. And then finally, just your comment in relation to the actions. So the actions, the action table that sits in the back of a farm plan is to be implemented over 5 years. So there is the opportunity to make sure that, something might happen in year 1, but it might be something else would come in year 3. And more importantly, and we'll make sure we signal this, is that when you write in actions, make sure that actually they're reasonable. They're what you can do in relation to the risks that you've got.
So just in response to that, so there is an opportunity to categorise those actions into critical, first up and secondary, and then there may be a large group of actions that can be put on the back end of that 5-year period. As people learn and grow and they understand, they get more confident with observing our agenda.
Yes. So any other questions? Last one, thank you, Councillor McPhail.
Just a quick question in regards to timing. I'm just trying to challenge the, obviously there's certain attachments, the dates that they can actually apply. Do you think that if we get this going that we will be able to start maybe pushing those dates, or we have to work to those dates? There's obviously farmers in other areas going, I'm happy to get on with this. So we'll be talking about that, please.
You, Chair? So I think intimately connected to the work that's happening through Appendix N and what the court ultimately decides in terms of content, and also what the council ends up deciding in terms of how and when we'll turn on that part of the plan. So making sure that we are able to tie those two pieces together, the national regulations and our Southland regulations, and making sure that the timing works for us. So we've got one process will give us that opportunity for those who are ready to go. What I would say is that we need to be live to the fact that there's a capacity element that will need to grow as we roll these things out. So I know one topic that we'll cover this afternoon is how fast do you want us to be pushing? What effort do you want us to be putting into the support for the community, the support for the consultants, the support for certifiers, our compliance team, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to talk all of those things through, because there's a long-term plan connection point as well. So that's a long answer to what I think is a simple question, but yes is the short answer. We should be able to move faster if we want to, and the key point of that is the Appendix N into play. So we need to make sure that we're tying those two things together. Question?
Yeah, thank you. Not on freshwater farm plans, but on plan change to a Tahu. We haven't talked about it much, but there is a new process for processing freshwater issues, where you have to have freshwater commissioners involved. And so what's the timeframe for setting that up? And will we need to start thinking about that this year, or it's not going to be introduced till the end of next year, but will be, will that process start at some stage early next year?
We are working on a program plan now, and that's definitely something that's highlighted in our program plan. It's not set down for this year, but we want to notify the plan at the end of next year. So to have it in place, we need a few months grace to organise the meetings.
So the appointment of these freshwater commissioners, is that something done by central government or by us?
Yes, so through you, Chair. So Judge Newhook is the current Chief Freshwater Commissioner. And prior to his being appointed, he's been working with the regional sector and the CEs, as well as directors from the freshwater space, excuse me. And it's their role to appoint freshwater commissioners, other freshwater commissioners, but you will have the power to appoint commissioners for Southland, but you'll have a pool to pick from, which exists from a freshwater commissioner pool, which is appointed nationally by the Chief Freshwater Commissioner. Yeah. So, and in terms of the timing for that, similar or comparable to what you would have been through, those of you who've been around the table, what you went through before with an appointing of a hearing panel. So that in that freshwater panel process is different than a council hearing process like you would have had on previous plan changes or previous plan notifications. But the makeup of a freshwater panel is appointed slightly differently. So this is very live for our neighbours at the moment in terms of what's happening in Otago, and yes, there's a fair amount for us to talk through and the implications of what's happening in Otago as well, because what constitutes a freshwater instrument will determine how much of our plan goes to a freshwater panel and how much of it goes through a existing Schedule 1 process. So all of that is before us, and as Liz has said, it's forming up into the project plan, but we're not going to get there in advance of talking to you about the meaty topics, etc., that we need your direction on.
So there will be opportunities for local people, regional people to be on the panel.
Assuming you're a freshwater commissioner, yes.
Right.
You have to be a freshwater commissioner in order to, or a Mount Whenua rep who's been appointed by the same group. More detail to come. Next good questions.
Somebody like to move the report be received, please. Thanks, Councillor Morrison. You can do it. Councillor Cook. Oh, Councillor Roy. Let's go there. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes. Carried. Thank you. I'm aware that time is ticking along, so but we do have a couple more important items. So please continue to apply your brain cells for just a few more minutes. Welcome, Ali and team. Not sure where all our lovely new chairs have got to. It's on here. I'm not offering mine, I'm sorry, they're quite comfortable compared to the old ones. Thanks, team.
Okay, well, so Roma and Charlie, they work in the policy and planning team, and they pulled together this report for you on the financial policy statement on business diversity. So we will take it as read. We're happy to answer any questions. Also looking at time, being aware that we do have time next week to talk about details. So happy to answer questions now, but also happy to answer questions next week. Is there anything you two want to summarise before we just keep on
We're going to workshop all of you next week, where we will get to dive into the detail of the provisions of the NPSRB and what biodiversity credit system is and all of that stuff. So
essentially, this is now live, came live on the 4th of August. It is very similar to the exposure draft that we saw last year, so there's no great big surprises in it. The good thing about it is that for most of the regional council responsibilities, we have time. So this is something we can build into LTP 24 and LTP 27. There are a few things that we are going to have to get on with now, some foundational work, and there's a lot of information we need. But yeah, happy to answer any questions you may have on the report.
Sorry, just very quickly, Chair. Sorry, just to add to the team's summation, just to be explicit, the summary in the report that's before you is the details of the regulations, not our views on a thing, it's black and white, thanks to the planning team of black and whites. It's just what's in the regulation. So it's to provide you with the quickest version of a summary that we could pull together so that you can see that what is before us. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Councillor McDonald, then Councillor Rodley.
Thanks, Madam Chair. That's very good. Look forward to getting into this and finding out about it. How can we make sure from the outset that we do have alignment with our other partner and significant partner in Southland District Council? That we're not just talking about stuff and they're talking about something different over there. I'm really concerned is that, you know, we talked earlier in this meeting about shared services was one of the words to go around. Why don't we come together with the district council and say that we've got a fantastic team of people here. Maybe we can work together and pool our resources on this project. I would like to see, for example, this would be a worst case scenario, that they start building a big team. District council start getting all this money coming in, building a big team, start pinching in people out of this building. It's just, I'm just throwing that out there. Get it all lined up first.
I'm gonna just pass it over to Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. Just to note that staff from across the councils in Te Marama have been meeting around the subject for a period of months, and we have a meeting of the second tier environmental group, which is, well, exactly what it says, essentially the second tier from across the councils in Te Marama meeting on the 26th of August to discuss this very matter now that we've received the gazettal, and it will come through the various channels from there, but we will be making recommendations about how we advance this work jointly.
So there's defined responsibilities. I'm aware of that. Is there a possibility of us working together with the district council around support around some of their responsibilities?
I think it's what
That's my question, because we both share the same ratepayer in this situation. I wouldn't like to see people paying things twice. So that's just
I think through your chair, just as well connecting to future planning, and as Ali mentioned, we've got some time. There needs to be that ongoing connection through in terms of our spatial strategy and the development of that jointly, which Rachel's already alluded to, is it's live and we're doing in partnership. The things aren't separate. We need to continue to work collectively with the territorials on what resources we've got and what we're going to need. So,
Councillor Rodway.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. There's two questions. One sort of relates to Councillor McDonald's one, to District Council, where they've had issues in the past with attempting to take action against various landowners who have been modifying what they thought was biodiversity, but what the farmer thought was just renewing pasture. So does this new policy statement assist in that area to make it clearer as to what is happening and what is not happening, so that we can avoid those kinds of issues in the future?
So you, for you, Madam Chair, yes, it will. So each of the districts will have to do significant natural areas, which is a mapping, bit of spatial planning that says where those really important bits are and what the rules are around those. And then that will limit what can and can't happen on resource consent and things like that through those areas. So it will make it much clearer for everybody about what is a significant natural area, what isn't, and what the rules apply. There will be additional rules outside of SNAs for some things to limit damage, but the really strict stuff will be in the SNAs.
Well, thank you, that's good to hear. And the other one was about highly mobile fauna, which is very interesting. Mainly birds, things that fly around, obviously. How have you had a thought about how that might be managed or dealt with?
So the first thing we need to do is find out what we've got in Southland and where they are, and where what's impacting them, what's threatening them, what knowledge do we have, and then what would be sensible in terms of, do we want to put rules in place to protect them, or do we just want to give out information? I think the lowest thing we can do is provide information to people. So we have to find out what they are and then provide the information, and then we need to look at them, what are the opportunities for additional protection.
I imagine there'll be opportunities to work with the Department of Conservation. I think there's a new Wildlife Act.
In reviewed, I think.
So there'll be opportunities to work together there.
They are going to be an absolute key partner in this. We will need them at every stage.
Thank you.
Councillor McPhail.
Yeah, I'll certainly enjoy that workshop. We're gonna be given. In regards to this and reflecting on the word sensible you used, I'm hoping that that's what comes into play in some of these rules, because they are going to be reasonably challenging for some. Just in regards to, I've got a couple of quick ones, and this might be around more consents. Obviously, the ecological qualified ecologist in regards to consents, a minor adverse effect. Does that put most dairy farms have more than minor adverse effect? I don't know where the categories, and just wondering how many consents will now need ecologists, qualified ecologists. It's the consents department, I suppose.
It will be, it'll be something we have to work through, but it will be whether they're having a minor effect on that Indigenous biodiversity. So unless you are grazing right the way through a bush block, and that is doing so much damage to the bush block, it's not regrowing. I don't think it would trigger, but it's something we are going to have to work through. But the intent is not to stop a dairy farmer dairy farming the way they currently are.
And another one is just in regards to the 10% areas. Just obviously this is where the workshop will come into, but it's obviously stated there. It's a bit worrying that is it about amalgamate, like is it individual responsibilities for landowners, or is it looking at Southland,
Yeah.
urban and rural?
It's separated into two types of areas, which is urban and non-urban. And it covers the whole region.
So we're looking at the whole region as are we covered by 10%?
Yeah, we'll be looking at our regional policy statement, and where we'll be looking at probably setting the urban boundaries. And I think our advice would be using the urban boundaries as defined by the district plans already. And then whether we want to split the region into different non-urban areas, like is it by FMU, is it by different catchments? What do we want to do that in our policy statement, and then set the 10% for that?
Yes, Roy.
Yeah. I don't know how to solve this, but there's so much subjectivity in what these values actually are. And in 1996, I was in a select committee during the reform of the Crown Pastoral Land, and the word significant natural area, that's the first time it was used in that legislation. And it's so subject, the subjectivity around what it actually means. And I've just gone and Googled what it actually means today. I think it's worse now than it was in 1996. You know, when you look at territorial authorities protecting SNAs, I just worry that we're going to be just consumed and actually still trying to decide what they are.
So there's a couple of appendices, and one of them is the criteria for what an SNA is, and it's a couple of pages long, and it's actually quite similar to the existing RPS, but that will make it really quite easy and consistent across the whole country about what an SNA means, because we'll all be following exactly the same definition. One of the keys is going to be making sure we've got the right data and the right science and information for our region, so we can apply it in regionally, but it should be a lot clearer than it used to be.
Chairman Horrell.
Yes, I mean, we've been waiting for this national policy statement for longer than I can remember. Its purpose is good. There's some stuff in here that is actually probably works against actually enhancing and increasing biodiversity. Jeremy's just mentioned the ecologists. The Southern District have estimated it costs them $9 million to identify the NEAs and have ecologists go through them. My worry is people are going to get rid of them rather than what we need is people to value biodiversity. So as soon as it's got a value, and it could be an offset for Iwakanawa whole, and get there without having some of the more nutty stuff that always gets into some of these areas. We all want to enhance biodiversity. We all want to put a value in increasing it. But I see one of the legislation that we probably should have.
Councillor McDonald, did you still have a supplementary question? Would you like to maybe repeat that before?
We're having a workshop on this, maybe that give detail, I think.
Indeed, thank you, councillor Cook. Seconded, councillor McPhail, all that, no, please aye. Aye, against, carried, thanks, team. And item 8, with group work program update. You're passing the buck for that one.
Either of us, Chair.
I'm going to get out of, I want to get out of the fire. Thank you, folks. Just hang in there for another 5-10 minutes. Thank you.
Very good.
Lucy, I'll pick you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So take the report as read. This is our standing item that Rach and I and our managers pull together in terms of what the groups are working on. It's got a blend of Rachel's team and my team's elements in it. If there's anything specifically that we wanted to draw attention to or that you would like to ask any questions on, between Rach, myself, Liz, and Dave was here, but I can't see him now. So yes, happy to answer any questions, councillors.
Thank you. Any questions? Tummies are rumbling. Oh no, councillor Morrison.
Well, I think there might be a typo on one of the tables on page. Yes, there was what page
Doesn't have page numbers on
it.
This one does 46. Yeah.
48, I think it was. In the 4th line down, it's got a proposal to deter entry of farm emissions to the NZTs. I think maybe it meant to read defer rather than deter. No, we can leave it. Without,
are you sure?
Someone else is wanting the council here.
I can't even find it now.
So the column on page 48, 4th row down, proposal to deter entry of farm emissions to the NZTs.
Oh, no, I'm really confused. Oh, thank you. We'll fix that. I'm sure.
Doing defer is probably what we're hoping for. Right?
Yes. Any other questions? Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, just want to the review of the coastal plan. I see. So if we it's going as far as next year, is that correct?
Started already.
Scheduled for that.
There will be workshops scheduled for that. I believe there's going to be something November.
Yeah.
We are working on a work program now. There's obviously been significant work been going on in this space for a number of years, and it's I think they've changed recently.
It sort of took us a bit of a slowdown with the loss of the marine fleet, but now we're back in business.
We are back in business and trying to work through what we can and work out how detailed that coastal plan will be this time around, because some of the issues are quite significant. Will need to be workshop.
Lucy.
So just very briefly, the surface water activity plan change that we notified was the primary kind of reason for some slowdown. We've focused a lot of our energy to make sure we could fix that urgent and loophole that was existing in terms of those surface water activities elements. In terms of where to next, certainly the team are working on reminding and doing a reprise of all the direction we've previously been given. The council has been working on the review of the whole coastal plan since before I started at ES. It's an enormous document that is first generation, and so there's a large amount of direction we've already been given by Mana Whenua and by yourselves, but there are some fun topics still left to traverse with yourselves and some further direction that we need in order to get to a point where the plan is in position to be notified.
So we'll be picking up on quite a lot of work on this workshop work pre-COVID, didn't we?
Yeah.
Can we revise that for the new council, revise the work and the those workshops when we get to next year?
Yes, so through you, Chair, what I would suggest isn't necessarily a revision, but certainly a reminder of what has gone before and a sense check to see what might need changing or uplifting or reframing, given that time has moved forwards. And certainly there's, as Liz has mentioned, working a lot at the moment with Te Marama and Mana Whenua around visions and values and what our desires are for the coast, and making sure that the direction you've previously given us matches up with what we now want and need for our coastal areas. And back to Paul's points from before, we've got the longest coast in all of South, in all of the whole Motu, and we need to protect it. And so we've just got to figure out some of those things out that's moved since.
And just to add to that, the Commissioner for the plan change is expecting to have the outcome of that out next 22nd, I think she said. I checked in with her. So hopefully that will be the week of the 22nd, to be clear. Yeah. Expected, not guaranteed. And that recommendation comes to council for it. Yeah. Somebody like to move that?
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Roy, Councillor Coral, all those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. And there are no public excluded items. Again, I'm very excited about that. So with that, we'll close the meeting, and in terms of the Karakia, all I'm going to say is thank you very much for your time. I'm trying to think of the words, but they've gone. So kia ora is ngā mihi. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.